What's up guys, Saf here on SuperSaf TV and welcome to another SuperSaf style camera comparison, this time between the Google Pixel 3 XL and the iPhone XS Max. So you guys know the drill, we'll be checking out all of the aspects of the cameras, front facing, rear facing, videos, images, and we'll also be checking out the audio. So look out for the audio icon in the corner of the screen and that will indicate to you which device the audio is coming from. We'll be switching between these two throughout this video as well to give you guys a good idea of the differences in audio. So we're currently using the front facing cameras on both devices, and just to test out stabilization I'm just walking right now. And now let's go ahead and run. Let me know what you guys think of the dynamic range. We've got a lot of light coming here from the background. Now with the Pixel you also have a wide angle front facing camera. So you can see here that I've switched to it. I don't think you can switch to it while you're recording, but if you can start off with that, you can see that we can get so much more of the background with the wide angle camera of the Pixel compared to the regular angle that we've got on the iPhone. Now we're onto the rear facing cameras, 4K 30 frames a second. The iPhone does have 2x optical zoom, so this means we can get in much closer. With the Pixel, I can try to replicate it with digital zoom by pinching. But that is digital zoom. Let's go back out. See the dynamic range here because we've got the sun out. And now we're just going to test out the stabilization. So just taking a walk. And now let's run. I'm just testing out the autofocus on the iPhone XS Max. Seems to be doing absolutely fine. Same test on the Pixel. Absolutely fine. And my ice cream's about to go. So that was the video. Now before we move on to images, let's have a quick look at what we're working with. The iPhone has a single 7 megapixel front facing camera with an f2.2 aperture. The Pixel has two front facing cameras, both 8 megapixels. The primary camera has a standard angle of view with an f1.8 aperture. And then we've got a secondary wide angle camera. Now this has a 97-degree field of view. This is going to be really useful for your Wi-Fi's, Groofies, whatever you want to call them. Now things are reversed on the rear because on the Pixel you have a single rear-facing camera, and on the iPhone you have dual rear-facing cameras. The primary cameras on both devices have 12 megapixels with an f1.8 aperture as well as optical image stabilization, but the iPhone does have a secondary telephoto camera which is going to give you 2x optical zoom. This is something that you don't have on the Pixel. Now you may have noticed that my iPhone looks very unique, and that is because I've got a Marble D-brand skin on here who are a sponsor for this video. They've got skins for the iPhone XS Max, the Google Pixel 3 XL, and many other devices. I'm going to be leaving a link to them in the description below. And final point to mention is that everything that you see has been shot on automatic, and that is to keep things as fair as possible. Now starting off with some selfies outdoors, both are doing really good. Dynamic range is great on both as well. The Pixel does look sharper compared to the iPhone, however, and with the Pixel you do have that wide angle lens, so this is a perfect situation where you might want to use it. And look how much more of the background that you get here on the Pixel with that wide angle lens. You can appreciate so much more of the surroundings with that wide angle camera, and it works really well. Now moving on to another selfie, I wanted to really test the dynamic range from the front facing cameras. Here once again both doing a really good job. We've got warmer tones on the iPhone, we've got cooler tones on the Pixel. I think this is going to come down to personal preference. The Pixel sharper once again, the iPhone maybe a little bit smoother on the skin, you might prefer that. But the main thing I can notice here is that the Pixel does have better dynamic range. If you look towards the clouds in the background, some of those have been blown out on the iPhone. And although the iPhone is doing an overall decent job, the Pixel is doing better in terms of dynamic range. Once again, testing out that wide angle selfie camera. And the dynamic range actually seems better on the wide angle camera. It looks like Google really applying some software magic here because everything is so good. Nothing is blown out here in the shot, and I'm very impressed with this wide angle camera on the Pixel. Now let's move on to the portrait mode from the front facing camera where it's going to blur the background. Both doing a very good job overall, but the edge detection is better on the Pixel. This is something that the Pixel has always been known to do really well from the front-facing cameras. The iPhone is not doing a bad job at all, but if you look towards the edges of my glasses as well as my hair, then things have been a little bit blurred out. Also, the dynamic range on the Pixel does seem to be better overall. And moving on to another portrait selfie, again, both doing a really good job, but the iPhone here does seem to have slightly better dynamic range. If you look towards my nose, things haven't been blown out as much as they have done on the Pixel. And also if you look towards my t-shirt and jacket on the iPhone, you can see things more compared to the Pixel. The Pixel once again is sharper, and I do prefer the edge detection overall on the Pixel compared to the iPhone. On the iPhone, things are a little bit more blurred out towards my hair, whereas the Pixel has done a great job in terms of edge detection. Now moving on to some low light selfies here, I think it's very clear to see that the Pixel is doing a better job. It's a brighter image, and that does seem thanks to the wider f1.8 aperture that we've got on the Pixel. And if we do use the front-facing flash where it illuminates the display, the iPhone is doing much better than it was in the previous shots, but here once again, I do prefer the image from the Pixel. It's just brighter, you can see more of the background, and the colors have also been better maintained. Now let's move outdoors. So we've got some shot here of the ice cream, which I specifically bought for this camera comparison. Color differences, once again, we've got warmer tones on the iPhone, whereas we've got cooler tones on the Pixel. I think this is going to come down to your personal preference. And moving on to some outdoor wide shots, I think both are doing a really good job, but I overall do prefer the iPhone image. I think in terms of dynamic range, it does seem to be better overall. If we look towards the darker areas, it looks like the shadow details have been better maintained on the iPhone compared to the Pixel, which is very interesting. Now the iPhone does have the 2x optical zoom, so it is going to let us get in much closer to our subject. I did try to repeat this with digital zoom on the Pixel, and both are actually doing a really good job, but the iPhone is sharper, and that is because it's got a dedicated lens. But the Pixel is actually doing pretty good considering its digital zoom. So they've got the SuperSaf zoom, which is using software to be able to zoom in closer to your subject. And I have to say it is doing an impressive job, but I would have to give the win for zoom to the iPhone. Now I really wanted to test out the dynamic range further, and this is a very tricky situation because we've got the sun in the background and then we've got this ice cream van, and here I do prefer the iPhone image. Colors are better maintained on the ice cream van, details on the shadows are better maintained here as well. The Pixel is doing good overall, but I prefer the iPhone image. Now let's look at the portrait mode from the rear-facing cameras where it's going to blur the background. Both are doing very good here. You'll notice that the Pixel is wider, and that is because you have a single camera on the Pixel. On the iPhone, it is using the telephoto camera to be able to achieve this. So to match things as close as possible, I have cropped in a little bit on the Pixel shot just so you can see a side by side, and both doing a very good job in terms of edge detection. Once again, those color differences, we've got warmer tones on the iPhone and cooler tones on the Pixel, but generally speaking, both of these are doing great. Now I went out and took a bunch more portrait shots just to really test out how good the edge detection is. And something that I did notice is that the iPhone did seem to do better in terms of edge detection from the rear-facing cameras. If you look at this example here, you can see that both have struggled with my ear, but the Pixel has struggled more, and it's also struggled a little bit with my hair. Now I can only assume this is because we've got the single camera on the Pixel compared to the dual cameras on the iPhones. So in terms of sensing depth, it's not doing as much of a good job as the iPhone is. And this is visible once again in this example. If you look towards my sunglasses and my hair, you can see that the Pixel has struggled here compared to the iPhone. So for edge detection, it does seem like the iPhone is doing a better job overall. Now let's move on to low light. At first glance, the Pixel does seem to be the better image. It's brighter, but I can notice more noise in the clouds compared to that of the iPhone. And if we go in 200%, the iPhone does seem to be a little bit sharper compared to the Pixel. Now this may be because the Pixel is using a slower shutter speed to let in more light, which is resulting in a little bit of blur. So I would have to call this image a draw, and trying out another image in low light. Here I do prefer the Pixel image. It's brighter, the colors are better maintained. And if we go in 200%, this time I would say in terms of sharpness, both are very similar, but I do overall prefer the low light image here on the Pixel. There will be a night sight mode available on the Pixel soon via a software update, but that software update isn't currently available. So those were the results. Now in terms of my conclusions, let's initially talk about images. From the front-facing camera, I would have to give the overall win to the Pixel. And that is because you had slightly better dynamic range. You've got the secondary camera, which is going to be great for group selfies and also to get in a lot more of your background. For the front-facing portrait mode, the edge detection also seemed better on the Pixel. And for low lights as well, the Pixel did seem to be better for the front-facing camera. But when it comes to the rear-facing camera images, things were very interesting and very close. In good light, I did prefer the iPhone overall. I think you had better dynamic range. You also have 2x optical zoom on the iPhone, and although the digital zoom on the Pixel was actually really good, the edge would have to go to the optical zoom. The edge detection for the portrait mode from the rear-facing cameras was also better in my opinion on the iPhone compared to the Pixel. This is something that I also found last year with the Pixel 2s. The edge detection from the rear-facing camera is not consistent. Sometimes it can struggle. I think this may come down to the fact that you've got the single camera on the Pixel, so it's not as good as sensing that depth as the iPhone is. And we did have the color differences, warmer tones on the iPhone, cooler tones on the Pixel. I think that will come down to personal preference. But for low light images, I did prefer the Pixel overall. As mentioned, we do not have the night sight update as yet, so things should only get better. If you do want me to do a low light SuperSaf style camera shootout between maybe a few devices, the Pixel, the iPhone, the Note, maybe the Huawei device that's coming soon, definitely let me know in the comments below on which devices you'd like me to do a low light shoot out of, and I'll try to do that once we've got the night sight update on the Pixel. And finally, let's talk about video. I think hands down you have to agree that the iPhone was much better compared to the Pixel. And if I'm completely honest, it seems like video was very much an afterthought for Google when it came to the Pixels. They very much concentrated on the imaging side of things, and those have worked very well. But video seems to be very secondary, and this is something that I also found with the Pixel 2 and 2 XL. If we compare the Pixel 3 XL to the iPhone XS Max, the video on the iPhone, firstly, you've got higher frame rates, so you've got 4K at up to 60 frames a second, as well as 1080p at up to 240 frames a second. But the actual video quality, the colors seemed better. We had better dynamic range on the iPhone, both from the front and rear facing cameras. Stabilization and autofocus, I would call a bit of a draw. And although both devices now record in stereo, the iPhone just sounded better to me. The Pixel sounded a little bit tinny. You can go back and have a listen if you'd like. And that's what I think. What do you guys think? Definitely let me know in the comments below. If you want to see more SuperSaf style camera comparisons, let me know which ones you'd like to see, and be sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you don't miss anything. If you want to see lots of images from lots of different devices, then give me a follow on Instagram. I'm at SuperSaf. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you did, do hit that thumbs up button for me. Thanks for watching. This is Saf on SuperSaf TV, and I'll see you next time. Yeah, that was long.